So, my name is George Mandis. I'm here to talk to you today about MIDI and JavaScript and tiny computers. I want to thank DonutJS for having me, and thank all the other lovely speakers that were here before me. It's been really nice. Full disclosure, I've given this talk about 5 times at different conferences. It's been a little different every time. It's usually 45 minutes to an hour, and I made an effort to pare it down. I gotta confess, I don't know how good of a job I did. So if I start speaking really quickly and this ends really abruptly, please bear with me. Anyway, yeah, so I'm here to talk about MIDI and JavaScript and tiny computers. Oops-a-daisy. There we go. So Matt already introduced me quite well. I kind of forgot I gave him all of that information. Yeah, I've been a freelance web developer for over a decade here in Portland. That is a really long time in development years. I have this funny page about fun facts about me. I grew up in Portland. I'm curious, who here grew up in Portland? Anybody? Oh, there's more than I thought. Okay, yeah. Every time I say that, like, oh, you're kind of you're a unicorn, but I feel like there's more of us than people realize. The rest of these you already know. I lived as a digital nomad in 18 countries. I like to throw this slide up at the beginning because I feel like if you throw some fun facts out about yourself, sometimes people remember the rest of your talk a little bit better. I was born in Saudi Arabia. That's a long story, interesting fact, gotta move on. I once unintentionally cheated running a marathon in North Korea. The joke is better when you don't already know that's coming. And my most popular project was a really silly Easter egg project that accidentally broke Marvel.com for about 5 minutes when I accidentally pushed an update and found out they were using it. And Newsweek used it briefly too to change all the articles on their website to things about zombie attacks. So that's my greatest contribution to open source. More relevantly, I really like to make things. I like to make frivolous, fun, and interesting things. I really like taking the tools that I have and bending and breaking them to do things that maybe they aren't quite intended to do. It's kind of a creative exploration. For me, not only is it fun, but I feel like it encourages me to keep learning, and I like to think it makes me a better developer to sort of explore these things. And my hope is, if this talk inspires anything, because there's really nothing practical in here, it would just encourage people to do that, to explore more, make programming fun, and just work on stuff because it's interesting. And okay, so I'd like to actually start with one of these little interesting things that I made. Do you guys have phones? Any of you? Yeah? No? I saw someone shake their head. If anyone wants to participate in this, please feel free to go to this website right now. I'll wait a second. It should work on Android and iOS. If you have iOS 11, it'll work. If you don't, it probably won't. So please go ahead and go there. You should see a little page that looks a little different than mine. Should I go back? Do I need okay, there we go. You should see a little button that says join the orchestra or join the symphony. I can't remember now, but please go ahead and click that button if you see it. It's pretty obvious, I hope. And also make sure the volume is up on your device. Is everyone okay if I move now? Nope. Just say when. Okay. Oh, okay, 11 people. Oh, good, it's working for somebody. Okay, so this is like a fun thing I made when I was learning how to use web MIDI and do some other interesting things. So let's just see what it does here. There we go. So that's gonna, thank you. There's no time, I have 10 minutes, I gotta go fast. I have a second demo that I would love to do, but I feel like I should probably keep moving. So what am I talking about today? I'm talking about JavaScript, obviously. I'm talking about tiny computers, and what I mean by that are single board like controllers, microcontrollers, single board CPUs like Raspberry Pis, those sort of things. I could just see quick raise of hands for people who are familiar with those, or maybe have dabbled with those. Yeah, it was kind of my hunch with this crowd, but yeah, okay. Who's dabbled with the Aspirino? I'm curious. No? Maybe a little bit? Okay. And then lastly, MIDI. So who's familiar with MIDI, or thinks they are? Okay, and how many are musicians? Okay, that's about what I thought. Okay, so why JavaScript? I will rush through this. JavaScript is everywhere. I don't need to tell you that. It's awesome. You can use it on everything. That's why JavaScript. It's asynchronous nature. It's a very nice fit with the way MIDI wants to work naturally. It's an asynchronous protocol. It doesn't really care when things happen. It just handles them when they do. Why tiny computers? To be honest, the real answer is because I like them and they're fun. But the other answer is they are kind of a nice fit with this tech stack that I'm trying to talk about, because you can make standalone projects that are kind of fun and autonomous. And over the past few years, the more I've experimented with hardware dabbling, the more it is just sort of it's kind of the hardware side of the open source movement, and it reminds me of the days when every project I started wasn't beholden to like Amazon Web Services or Facebook or Google, and it's just kind of nice to like own something on a little box that nobody else can touch. And I like to build more things on that when I can. Arduinos, Raspberry Pis. Who's used the chip computer? I'm curious. Anybody? Not one hand. These are great. You should check them out. They're really cheap. I don't know. I really like them quite a bit. Then Esperinos, like I said before, these are great. This little guy in my hand is actually an Esperino. This is a puck. It's a particular flavor of the Esperino called the puck.js. I can write software in JavaScript that runs natively on this little guy. I've turned this into a Bluetooth MIDI controller, which I'll talk about in a minute, and I'm using that to control my slideshow in a really kind of ridiculous, ineffective way. So why MIDI? So what is MIDI exactly? It's an answer to the musical instrument device interface. It doesn't, kind of helps you, kind of doesn't. One of the reasons I think there's some confusion surrounding what MIDI actually is because it's we sort of use it the term to refer to three different things that are kind of distinct things. Oh yeah, real quickly, MIDI was invented in 1983, which I think is really, it's just interesting that a protocol invented in 1983 can be used today for a lot of creative and interesting applications. So it is first of all, MIDI is a protocol. It is a standard. There's actually a body of organizations that decide what different MIDI messages mean and whatnot. There's an agreed upon standard. And it's also a file format, which I think is, when people talk about MIDI, the thing that they are most often referring to and thinking of. So I like to tell people, MIDI is not like this. It's kind of associated with like sort of chintzy sounding music that came with your computer in 1995. I had a lot of fun actually finding these on the internet and reading about them. Anyway, I'll give that one a moment. Yeah, so it's not chintzy sounding computer music. It's those things I mentioned before. It's a standard, it's a protocol, and it's also a file format. So I'll kind of blow through this real quickly. MIDI, the protocol, it allows electronic musical instruments to speak with one another. That's the gist of it. That's all it is. We can use that today to do much more interesting things, but that is the gist of it. MIDI, the standard, like I said, there's an association that decides what that is. That basically they get together and they decide, hey, these numbers are going to mean when I press this button on my keyboard, that is this note being turned on, and so on and so forth. So that's what the standard is. And the file format, I sort of just demonstrated that for you. It's effectively a bunch of MIDI signals and events that are stored in a file and in a sequence, basically. I tend to think of it kind of like a player piano like that, which is a really, really super dated reference, I realize, every time I get to this slide. So I threw in that one just because it looks a little better. So back, why do I like MIDI? Because it's asynchronous. More interesting to me, it talks to hardware, and we can talk to it with JavaScript. That is the thing that's really interesting. And the thing that's even more interesting than that to me is Chrome can talk to MIDI natively. How many people knew that? I'm curious. Okay, so what's interesting about this, so MIDI is technically it's a hardware protocol. And your browser right now, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think there's any other protocol that the browser can speak directly to hardware that you plug in the same way that MIDI can. Like, you can plug in a piece of MIDI software and you can write up a little page with JavaScript, and you can start having a two-way conversation between this device and a web page. And Chrome does that natively. You don't need special extensions or plugins or things running on your computer. It just works. And so that's the other reason it's really cool, because you can start making really cool things today. And it's like sort of, I tell people because I do a lot of mentoring these days and working in code boot camps and stuff. It's like a really super low barrier to entry way to dip your toe into the Internet of Things in some ways. If you ever just wanted to make something where you hit a button and something happens on the page, like, more interesting button than your keyboard button, I suppose, you could use MIDI to do that. You could go down to the music store and find an old beat up keyboard, find an adapter to plug it into your computer, and it'll recognize that. And you could start making things that are not necessarily music with that setup. Web MIDI has 59% global coverage, which is kind of silly. I'll go through this real quick. When I talk about MIDI controllers, there are a lot of pre-existing USB-ready controllers, like this little keyboard I have up here on my desk. You can also find old hardware going back to 1983. You just buy an adapter, plug it in, it'll start working. And this is where the tiny computers come back in. You can even start building your own using Arduinos and Esperinos and other things like that. And what's fun about building your own is you can, have it do more interesting things. Like I've programmed this guy to send 3 different MIDI messages depending on how many times I click it. I can go forward, I can go back. If I'm feeling nervous, I can do it 3 times. Oh, wait, that didn't work. Well, we'll see. I'll try that again in a minute. Anyway, what I'm showing you on the screen really quickly are different types of MIDI controllers, basically external devices we can plug in. Most of the ones I've shown you are all music-based, and because it is a music protocol first and foremost, it is mostly music-based hardware you're going to find. But there's an interesting variety of hardware. It's not just keyboards. I mean, sometimes there's buttons. Like this little thing I have down here on the floor, I can use to, I've mapped to run my slideshow and do some other interesting things. This one up on the screen, you can breathe into it and bite it, and it translates that kind of interaction into MIDI signals that you can play with. This one has an accelerometer built into it, which I have up here, which I probably won't get to, that you can use, and it maps the X, Y, and Z coordinates to MIDI signals, and you can start making interesting interactive things with that. This guy built his own MIDI controller back in the 80s. So I'll talk very briefly about a MIDI message. All of this stuff, honestly, right now, none of that matters. All you need to know is that a MIDI signal is 3 numbers. That's all that you really need to know. When we start playing with MIDI and JavaScript, whether we're sending messages or receiving messages, it all boils down to 3 numbers. And if you want to make an application that is not necessarily musical, then you don't even need to precisely know what those numbers map to. You just need to know, you don't need to know what those numbers mean musically, MIDI standard-wise. You just need to know what those numbers map to on the device. So all I need to know is that those 3 numbers up here right now map to this key when I press it here on my keyboard. Okay? I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit. Real quick, so the way that you access MIDI in the browser, it's not unlike the way you access any other browser-based API, like location or notifications or the camera or the microphone. You basically ask for permission for it. It returns a promise. If it fails, you have a function that handles failure. If it succeeds, you have a function that handles success, and then you can do a little bit more depending on what specific devices are installed. You start iterating through those, figure it out from there. I've got code on a website if you're curious, and I'm happy to talk to you about it. And then, let's see. That's not it. You can also play with JavaScript and MIDI on the server side in Node. I won't go into that too much, but it's really interesting. And getting back to playing with tiny computers, it's a really nice way to make standalone projects. So let me skip to just a couple projects here before I wrap it up, because I can tell that I'm just about out of my time up here. I will come to let's see. So that's the first demo that we did. This was the second one that I will also skip. Let's do this one. So this one, I like to show this one. This might be the only one I show. Oops. We'll see. So this one, this is the first project that I made a couple years ago. And I made it because I'm a musician. I'm actually a very analog musician, which is kind of funny with all this. But I was playing a show, and I played guitar over this guy, and we wanted to have some kind of trippy visual behind us. We wanted to have like poetry on top of videos and just some sort of artsy, interesting backdrop to our playing. And I'd been playing a little bit with MIDI on my computer at the time, making things in GarageBand and whatnot. And I found this program that let me basically write JavaScript that reacted to MIDI signals coming in and out of my computer. And what I made basically was this, and I mapped it to these little buttons I have on the floor because I could play my guitar while I hit these buttons. And what I made was this random poetry generator that would overlay randomly generated poetry on top of randomly selected videos from archive.org. And it's kind of fun because every once in a while you get like accidental profundity every once in a while when you play with this. I can actually watch this for a kind of embarrassingly long time. So this is the first thing I made that made me think, hey, I could make a lot of very non-musical things using this combination of JavaScript and MIDI. And 2 years later, I've started giving talks and presentations on this. I will leave you with this. Let's see. So this is something I have not built yet, but I really want to build. So who here is familiar with the Goonies? Okay, that's kind of what I thought. Yeah, most people. That is a very like American-centric cultural experience I learned giving this talk somewhere else once. The very first time I presented this slide, I asked and like 0 hands went up in this very large room, and I realized, oh no. Anyway, so there's a scene in the Goonies where they have to play this organ to pass through a particular part in the maze-like area that they're trapped in. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about, I don't know why I was thinking about it, but I was thinking, is that something that I could make using JavaScript and tiny computers and all of this and MIDI? And the short answer is we kind of could. So I made a fake one, which I won't exactly demo, but basically if I play the right chord, it'll open the door eventually. Like that's the proof of concept. JavaScript and MIDI working together, listening to my keyboard. Eventually it lets me pass in this little game I made. That's fine. But to do a real one, we'd have to start mapping our controllers to servos and other physical real-world objects. And what I'm showing you right here is actually someone using MIDI to control those motors that they have up there on the screen. And it's on my bucket list to build a real-life Goonies skeleton organ, I suppose. But this is the kind of outside-the-box thinking I'm like trying to get to with this. I'm skipping through real quick to see if there's one more thing I might show before I go here. Yeah, okay, this is the very last thing I'm going to show, and then I'm going to go. So this is a particular controller called a Novation Launchpad. It's popular with DJs and stuff. I really wouldn't know much about that. But basically, I made a working game of Go using this guy. So you can play a very small 8x8 game of Go using a Launchpad. I actually have this running on a tiny little computer, and I had it running headless, and I had it running off of a battery for a while, so I have like the world's most inefficient tiny game of Go that you can now take using a controller and this. Okay. So I'll just skip to the end here. And many more. Does anyone know what this is? I'm curious. Or where this is, I should say. No? This is, I don't know. This is up in Seattle. It's outside the Experience Music Project. They have this really cool interactive musical installation that they've made using billiard balls and steel cables and all kinds of things. And I thought it was a really cool application of non-musical materials and things used to build a giant like interactive instrument. And that's the kind of thing I look at and sort of my inspiration for building these really goofy, backwards, non-musical things engineered using MIDI and JavaScript. Anyway, thank you for your time. My name is George, and if you want to see some of the other demos I didn't have time to show you, I'd be happy to show you later. Thanks.